So tell me a little bit about your mother's experience with cancer.
You know what, she was diagnosed when I was in college, and from the time she was diagnosed until her death, it was about 18 months. And she fought really hard. It was ovarian cancer. My mom was probably the sweetest, most beautiful person inside and out that I've ever known. She was a school teacher, so a lot of her students called her the sergeant because she was a big disciplinarian, but they loved her. They loved her for that. And I think she was that way with my brothers and myself. I talked to her almost every single day while I was away at college. We were very close. And I just remember she started telling me that she was having some joint pain. She went to a couple of doctors, and she was just really, really concerned, but they never could pinpoint it. I guess the hardest thing was I knew my mom was so afraid of getting cancer. We had talked about that. She had already come out of surgery and was in her room. And I just remember going in, you know, to see her and holding her hand. And I just remember, and I'm sorry, I get emotional.
Okay.
I just remember her grabbing my hand and she said, "Did they tell you it's cancer?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." I said, "They did." And she said, "Well, I'm gonna beat it." And I said, "Yes, you are." But at that point, it had already spread, you know, into her other organs. And she did extensive chemo, lots of surgery. But from that point on, she lived for 18 months after that.
So after this experience with your mother, you later found out that you had cancer.
Yes. It was really crazy because I had already had a hysterectomy trying to prevent the ovarian cancer from ever happening. I was the exact same age as my mom when I was diagnosed, 42, the exact same month, March. I just remember thinking, I had to do this all over again, but this time, you know, I know how my mom felt. You know, the first thing that goes through your mind is, oh my word, my children, I can't leave my children. And I guess that's probably the hardest thing when I was diagnosed to think about, because I knew what my children were going to be going through, but at the same time, I knew what my mom went through, not wanting to leave us. After that, probably the second hardest thing was to go and tell my daddy. And I think that was so hard. I mean, it was probably harder to tell my daddy than it was to tell my children, because I just felt like, you know, okay, well, he went through this with my mom, and now that I'm a parent, I can't imagine having my child come to me and say that I have cancer. But of course, I was like my mom, and I said, I'm gonna beat this. And I said, I am gonna beat it. I was at the same hospital where my mom had her surgeries. I had to go back for all of my surgeries and tests. The same place she had chemo, I had to go back. So it was crazy because not only was this a whole new experience for me on this side, but yet it was so familiar because I had been there already. I had been with her for her chemos. I had been with her at this hospital for her surgeries. And so it was just, that was a strange feeling for me to relive all of that. I just felt like I was going to be okay. I really did. I mean, I knew it was going to be a long struggle. The doctor told me from the very beginning, you're looking at a full year of surgeries, treatment, and recovery, and it's going to be difficult. We're going to hit you very hard because you're very young and healthy otherwise. Being so many years after my mom, the progress, even though it was a different kind of cancer, with all of the cancers, they've made such great strides in progress. Even since I've had my chemo, the success and the treatments that they're doing now, there's so many things to help with the side effects. My doctors were very positive. They treated it very aggressively. I had a bilateral mastectomy. I also had already had the hysterectomy, which actually ended up being a great thing because mine was estrogen and progesterone positive, so they didn't want me to have any hormones. So they immediately took me off all hormones, you know, cold turkey. That was another thing. The hormones had been feeding it, which is why the tumor had gotten larger in that 6-month period. So I had a very, you know, what they call dense dose chemo, which was very strong and very hard. And then, you know, the surgeries, and I did do reconstruction during that time. Had to stop because the chemo got a little too hard, and so we had to finish that afterwards. But yeah, I don't know. I knew that I was going to be okay. It was very important that I was honest with my children. And another reason, my daughter, she was 13, and she heard me talk about my mom all the time, and she knew my mom had passed away, and she had a lot of anxiety anyway when she was young about the weather and just nervous. And unfortunately, I think because I did talk about my mom a lot, I made her very nervous. But once I was diagnosed, I was very honest with her, and I said, I'm right now, I'm not gonna die. They're telling me it's aggressive. They're gonna treat it. I'm gonna be fine. If anything changes at any point, you will be the first to know. I will not hide that from you. But it was interesting how she handled it. Like I said, she'd been very clingy, and then all of a sudden she became very distant. And I think in her mind, if she separated, that if I did die, it wouldn't hurt as bad. So that was hard, but fortunately, I knew what was going on. The good thing about that, I think that's part of the reason why she's such a young, independent young woman today at 25. I mean, she amazes me. I've learned so much from her. And so I'm glad I didn't shield her. And my son, he's 23 now, but he was the opposite. He was very compassionate. He wanted to be my caretaker. He wanted everything to be okay. When he was in high school, he told me one night, he said, Mama, I just had a friend ask me what had been the best moment in my life up to this point. He said, you know what I told her? And I said, no. And he said, the day my mom beat breast cancer. And that just, touched my heart so much that, here he is in high school, and I'm thinking, he's got all these things going on. He's the quarterback for the football team, and all these great things are happening to him. But in his mind, that was the best thing that had ever happened. And, it made me realize just how much it impacted their lives at such a young age. And, my hope and prayer is that they never have to experience this disease in any way ever again. And that's my hope and prayer for everybody, and that's why I tell my story. That's why I support, all the research that's being done in any way I can help, because it's a bad thing. My faith is very strong. I depended on that. My family and my friends are very strong. I depended on them, and they rallied around me. And I always tell people it's not something I would ever ask for, but I would never give it back, because it truly made me a better person in so many ways. I feel like my mom is with me all the time. I mean, I really do. I feel like she was just always such a part of my life that even now, it's so funny because I can hear her in me when I say things to my daughter. And that's the one thing she used to always say to me: you will never know how much I love you until you have a daughter of your own. And you know that now.
I do,
with
yes.
your own daughter. And it's so true. And I can remember when I had my daughter, it was like, wow, now I really know how much my mom loved me.